Welcome to another edition of Green is Good. I'm so honored to have with me today Meea Kang. She's the co-founder and president of Domus Development. Welcome to Green is Good. Meea.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Meea, you've done such wonderful work at Domus Development, and we're so honored to have you. But before we start talking about the great company you co-founded and that you're the president of, please talk about the Meea Kang story and how you got the journey leading up to Domus and how you even got there.
Well, it's definitely one of those roads that had a lot of twists and turns along the way. I started out in the Midwest. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. My father emigrated to the States to get his higher degree in education and was a PhD and a professor at the University of Illinois for many years. In Champaign-Urbana, and moved there in the Midwest. Spent a lot of formative years there looking at a lot of the world as being pretty flat. Okay. In terms of cornfields and soybean fields, and got a lot of extreme weather conditions, and it was a fun place to grow up, but kind of hard to understand the rest of the world from that perspective. But we moved from there to the East Coast, and I lived in Connecticut during my high school years. My father taught at Yale, and exposed to a lot of different things there, and then went off to college, Cornell University, where I focused on studying fine arts and really explored the world in a very creative way, very out-of-the-box thinking, did things like teach myself how to weld, made large-scale steel sculptures, taught in the School of Architecture as sort of a TA, really kind of got very interested in the built environment. From there, traveled, lived in Rome for about a year, Taipei, Taiwan for about another year, really just exploring the world and seeing a lot of different ways people are living and the kinds of densities that we see in especially some of the Asian cities. Came back a little bit refreshed and worked in Los Angeles in the interior design business, where I actually had clients that were somewhat Hollywood stars in their own rights, and realized that wasn't really my fit. And I went back to architecture school to study really how architecture can help to solve some of the human conditions like housing and sustainability. And it really opened my eyes to really how you can reach a triple bottom line with building the right kinds of buildings for folks.
Wow.
And that really led me to architecture.
And how many years ago did you start this company?
10 years ago.
10 years ago. Wow.
Actually, 11 now. Let's say 11 years. It was 2003 when I started.
11 years ago. So now, 11 years into it, when you started it and you said, I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other and start Domus Development, has it become what you've wanted? Has it exceeded your expectations? Or are you on track for the dreams and the vision that you originally had 11 years ago?
I have to say I'm very blessed. I feel very blessed. We've worked really hard, but it really is turning into the company of my dreams in terms of being able to really get out there and take on extremely complex problems and find solutions that really were brought on through a collective action. It was really through a lot of work with community members and defining goals and finding solutions through that process. And then not letting anything stop us. So we've reached challenges like zoning and outdated building codes and have had to go in there and modernize entire regulatory systems.
Well, for our listeners who want to follow along and see the great work that Domus Development has done and is doing, you could go to www.domusd.com. So you're 11 years an overnight success in 11 years. That's really what's happened here. I get it. So but I'm on your website. It's a beautiful website. I've already studied it, but now I'm on it while we're doing this interview. And there's so many great things you've accomplished already and so many great things you're doing. I want to talk a little bit about one of the things I've seen on your website. And it's a word that I'm not familiar with. You've done infill development projects. Can you explain what these type of projects are versus the standard, let's go build a building in a hole type deal that we see here in New York City where I live and I work and I see in big cities? What does an infill development project mean, and why are you guys so good at it?
Well, the term infill development really refers to building on underutilized land within existing cities and towns. And so, frankly, it's the opposite of sprawl, which is really taking building on land that may have been open space or former agricultural land. And really, especially in the state of California, infill development is really critical to accommodating growth and redesigning our cities to become more environmentally friendly and socially sustainable. And so it really means rather than taking productive farmland out of production to build more far-flung subdivisions, we really look to rebuilding our cities and existing urbanized areas. And you go in there, in any urbanized area, there are vast tracts of neglected and underutilized lands. Oftentimes, they might have contamination on them because they were former industrial uses, but they really do have the potential to be transformed and catalyze an entire new resurgence and revitalize existing communities. I mean, we see it, we've called it white flight in the 60s, where folks really turned their backs on their cities, and they continued to kind of build new tract homes further and further away outside of our cities. And we find that development pattern is really not sustainable. Not only do people travel long distances to commute to their jobs, the cities and the small towns are really hampered with needing to support the infrastructure of those suburban areas that are based on densities that might be 10 units to the acre.
And so basically, you're a real estate recycler. You're recycling products that have been used before and need to be repurposed again. But instead of going out on the hinterlands and building anew out in the farmland, so you're just redeveloping our cities.
That's how I feel. I feel very lucky and fortunate. Sometimes I call it reweaving our cities.
I love it.
And sometimes there's a lot of emotional stress around, neighborhoods, especially with people who have seen the transitions over the years. Yeah. And oftentimes when I come into a community, there's a lot of emotions that run high. In terms of, there are a number of neighbors. Infill is not easy. And infill, primarily, you've got to deal with your neighbors. You've got to hear your neighbors. You've got to work with your neighbors. And you've got to bring about a type of change that not only works for you as the developer from a bottom line, but can also bring benefit to the community. Wow. And I think neighbors want to see that. And they do expect that development in infill areas are taken to a higher level of standard.
And you're also straddling the legacy that they've seen, but also the new generation that wants new and bright and shiny and stuff like that. So you're also on that straddle as well.
Absolutely. And what's interesting about California, California's population is estimated to grow by over 500,000 people a year. Wow. And so by this 2020, the state predicts that over 45 million people will be living in California. Wow. And at that point, and even now, with that many people calling California home, it's beyond imperative to use our resources more efficiently and improve our quality of life. And we can do this by building more compact neighborhoods. And
your firm does infill developments in all sorts of settings, suburban, urban, rural. But does infill actually always have to mean high density or getting the most, squeezing the last inch out of every space? Or can it be a very type of infill and recycled resource?
In my opinion, infill is a very and densities really are catered to the existing areas. So if you're in an urban area where most of your buildings are 10-story, 12-story, say San Francisco, you can do tall towers. You're looking at big densities. You're looking at 100 units to the acre or even beyond 200 units to the acre, especially in Manhattan. But of course, that one size doesn't fit all. So in smaller cities, there's usually a zoning that exists on various sites. Infill often will increase the zoning that's there, but only by, say, 20%, 30% maybe at the most. So you could see projects, we did a project in a rural community up in Lake Tahoe community, and it was 3,000 people. It's a small town, unincorporated part of the county. Right. And the densities there were 7 units to the acre. Wow. And they were very small parcels, 100 long by about 20 deep, 20 wide. And the maximum number of units you can build on each one of these sites was 2 units to the acre. We were able to work with everybody to increase those densities from 7 units to the acre up to 30 units to the acre.
Good for you.
And that was an example of how we can work in a rural setting.
Right.
But as far as stories on the building, because we're building smaller units, because apartments tend to be smaller footprints,
right.
you could actually work a lot within the form of a building to fit the typography of the area, to fit the typological sort of vernacular of the area. So we built these in maximum 3-story buildings. And they were very much in keeping with the look of the area, and it added actually a little bit more dimension and character to the neighborhoods. But by doing so, we dispersed the density amongst the community. We did what was called a scattered sites development, and we went from about 26 to 30 units to the acre, which was vastly the densest thing that had ever been improved in this region.
For our listeners who just joined us, we've got Meea Kang on with us this morning, and she is from Domus Development. She's the co-founder and president. It's www.domusd.com. Meea, what is the the term brownfield? I know what that means, but for our listeners, you're an expert at brownfield site redevelopment. Why is that a challenge, and what is a brownfield site to start with?
Well, John, you more than anyone knows.
Yep.
When companies have waste, back when there were no regulations, most companies just dumped that waste either into the groundwater or into the rivers or into the land. So brownfields are often abandoned, closed, underutilized industrial commercial facilities. And often these brownfields are located, say, in an abandoned factory town or in a former industrial area where, of course, change has happened, regulations may have happened, and businesses have shuttered, but yet what they leave behind is a footprint of, frankly, a lot of really nasty contaminants that somebody needs to come and clean up. And oftentimes the business may no longer be in business. They won't have the resources to clean these sites. So sometimes they're called orphan sites, where either the city, in many cases redevelopment agencies, would come in and find funding, say, from the EPA to get enough money to do the type of analysis on the site to determine what the contaminant levels are, and come up with a lot of different scenarios on how they're going to remediate, in other words, take out all of those contaminants and bring that land back to a buildable state. According to the EPA, there are over 500,000 brownfield sites in the U.S. today, and that really only counts the ones that have actually been studied and documented. So EPA believes that the actual number of brownfields is vastly more than that. And they're difficult. There's a lot of risk. A lot of times, your consultants can only determine the levels of pollutants based on whatever they've dug up. And oftentimes what happens is once you get in the ground with your plan, you find that the levels are frankly much greater than what anyone had studied or anticipated. And so you need to have great resources and the ability to take it from beginning to end and actually clean it all the way up. And it often requires getting another certification from your local regulatory agencies to confirm that no further action is needed on these sites. So it's expensive and it's difficult. But often we find, especially as our cities have grown, these brownfield locations, these former industrial areas are right either in the middle of a growing new community or revitalizing community, or they're really on the edges of what absolutely needs to change in order to sort of, really bring the community together. So they're critical pieces, I think, to the equation of infill development and sustainable communities going forward.
But Meea, you're an expert at Domus is an expert at cleaning up these challenging locations, and you don't learn that stuff in architecture school. So what gives you the eye, the sense, the gut to say, this one's a good one? We can, we could take this ugly duckling and make it into a diamond.
Well, I definitely do a lot of due diligence.
Right.
I will work with excellent consultants. I'll read a lot of reports. I'll really study up on the situation and the solutions that we need to undertake. And frankly, it's plan, and then plan for failure. So you really have, contingencies and a lot of plan Bs and Cs in the event that plan A doesn't work. So it's a matter of just making sure you've got a mitigation strategy that can work. And then, frankly, part of it is you really hope that you've done all your homework and you're going to hold your breath and you're going to jump in and you're just going to go for it and solve problems. And I think oftentimes we often work with a great team, a development team and city partners, and we're all in it together. So it really does help in terms of, analyzing and underwriting. And then because I work with often institutional money, we have a lot of attorneys looking at everything and a lot of people vetting and double checking what we've assumed. And so really, I think all of those checks do help the process in making sure we have the adequate resources to address these problems.
I'm on your website now, and again, I've read about your recent national award, and congratulations on winning this national award from the EPA for Smart Growth Achievement for the La Valentina built project in Sacramento. So there was 77 applicants across 31 states. Your group was chosen. Domus was chosen to win this. Talk a little bit about why. How come you stood above and beyond all these other applicants across this great country? How did you win this? Why did you win this? And why does your company continue to achieve and overachieve and hit levels of greatness that others are just missing?
Well, thank you. It's just, I'm still surprised and honored all at the same time. It's certainly is a great honor to be recognized by the U.S. EPA,
Sure.
especially for the fact that we took on this site that was, frankly, a bit of an ignored site for 20 years. The acreage was about 1.2 acres, and it was just on the sort of gateway into downtown Sacramento. The main thoroughfare that this building faces is a former highway. It's called 160, and this is how the highway kind of slows down as it goes into the city. The traffic pattern on this road is about 15,000 cars a day are commuting into work.
Wow.
As well as light rail. And it's a one-way street, so it drives everybody into town, and so people are passing at speeds of probably 30, 35, 40 miles an hour. So people are just kind of going from point A to point B. And for a long time, this area was industrial, and these sites were auto body repair shops, and people just ignored it, partly because the area had a long history of crime. And there is a large sort of homeless population that resides near the river. This is the path from the river to connect people to social services. So often what people will see and what people think about is frankly, homeless people and loitering and whatnot. So it's been a very challenged site over the years, and one that didn't necessarily rise to the level of importance from a city's perspective. It was always just, let's try to get something done. So in a way, it was a little bit of a sleeper that we were able to take this very small site, 1.2 acres, complete brownfield, and turn it into a mixed-use TOD community that's really taken the city of Sacramento and the project to a national level. So it's really a great honor. The site, being that it was incredibly challenging, really led us to find and seek solutions that were out of the box. The existing zoning on the site allowed us to build at a maximum 35 apartments. And at a maximum height level of 3 stories. And we felt that was just not enough to take on the kinds of challenges we had to face. The brownfield remediation, just building in general. And we sought to seek higher zoning densities. And so we were able, on our station building, which is the mixed-use 4-story building, we got the zoning, we were able to be approved at a density of 78 units to the acre.
Wow.
And we built a 4-story building and ground floor retail and apartments ranging from studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms, as well as one-to-one parking. But when we started, the city wanted 165 parking spaces. We needed to have all these rules and regulations that really just did not permit the type of development we wanted to do. So frankly, our vision was quote-unquote illegal. It was not permissible. So what we had to do is completely change the zoning to permit this site. And what that meant was about 16 different variances and special permits. We had to be out there every single time. At any point, someone could try to throw a stone at us and try to wreck the whole and bring the entire project down. We could have been sued at any point of the game, especially during the entitlement phase when you're trying to get a project approved. And it was really wrought with a lot of challenges, but we were able to overcome and get our community to support it because for so many years they were tired of the crime. They were tired of the fact that there was no investment in this area. We were able to get this approved. We were able to get financing during the height of the Great Recession.
Unbelievable.
So during that time, thank you. During that, financing was difficult, but we managed to pull it together.
It was non-existent. Let's be honest. I mean, it's just it's difficult. You're being kind and humble. Oh my gosh.
And at the same time, we knew everything was so difficult, so we just kept adding challenges to our plate. And one of the challenges we took on, so we have two components. It's La Valentina Station, which is our 4-story building, and then we have La Valentina North, which are 18 townhomes that are basically stacked townhomes over flats. And we were able to work with the utility company, SMUD, Sacramento Municipal Utility District. They gave us a grant, and we developed the very first near net zero energy apartments in all of Sacramento.
Wow.
Which means that, yes, that we can generate as much electricity by solar panels on the roof for not only the common area uses like your outdoor lights and for the building, but also for the interior and for the residence uses. And so one of our residents has told me that before she moved to La Valentina, her energy bill was about $125 a month. She pays $5 a month.
Oh my God! And this is a great point. We're down to the last couple of minutes or so, but this is a great stepping point. So I know you do so much work. You mean, first of all, you recycle you recycle communities, you recycle pieces of land, brownfield and infills. So, but you're also working. You're very analog and you're very nose to nose with your long list of people who want to come and live in your great communities and your great projects. Talk a little bit about reducing footprint. I mean, you just talked about this lady who went from 125 and she lives in your property and she's paying $5 now. For our listeners out there, what are your top 2 or 3 things people can do to reduce their carbon footprint?
Absolutely. Get out of your car and start moving. If you have a nearby grocery store or, some errand that you can run without getting in your car, take that route. Take the options that are non-fossil fuel driven. I mean, it will dramatically start to change the way we commute, the way we move, and ultimately, not only will we save money, frankly, for not having to go to the gas station all the time. We're going to have better air quality. We're going to be healthier people because we're moving around.
I love it.
And I think if we're going to do one thing, say, you're not going to put solar panels on your roof. You're not going to compost because you live in an apartment.
Right.
Try not driving every day. And in our development at La Valentina, 40% of our population does not use their car on a regular basis. They will either walk, take transit, or ride their bike.
That is great advice. We're down to the last minute or so. What project's coming up that you wanted to give a shout out to that you have that Domus has in development right now or in the works?
Well, we're excited to start construction on a new senior TOD, which means transit-oriented development here in Sacramento. We're hoping to break ground later this summer. It's called Curtis Park Courts. And what's exciting is we're actually building higher density senior housing in a former brownfield that has been remediated, and it is within 5 minutes of the local community college. So It's going to bring access to seniors to a variety of educational experiences as well as to a large new retail shop that's opening. And it's in a very desirable area in downtown Sacramento. And we're excited to see that project move forward. We're also doing a lot right now with community clinics and incorporating community clinics with affordable housing and trying to reach a greater range of affordability and supportive housing. And we're also looking at doing several veterans projects in areas that really really need some revitalization at the same time that are also home to where a number of different vets are moving to. So we're excited about some of the things we're working on.
For all of our listeners out there that want to learn more about Meea Kang and Domus Development, go to www.domusd.com. Meea Kang, thank you for being an inspirational leader in sustainable real estate development. You are truly living proof that green is good.